All righty. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. My name is Allison LaFerlita. I'm the Executive Director for the Nonprofit Resource Hub. For those of you that are not familiar with us, we are an association that provides support, products, services, and education to the nonprofit sector. We have a tremendous amount of resources that are available to you as nonprofits free of charge, like today's webinar. And if you are not a nonprofit partner with us, it is free of charge for you to join. Please go ahead and do so this afternoon or while you're on the webinar, nonprofitresourcehub.org. Become a nonprofit partner. Today, we are going to be discussing PEOs. And I know that this can be somewhat confusing if this is not your normal everyday work. And we have two experts here to help clarify things for you, make it easier to understand, and really help you through your questions. You are welcome to put your questions in the chat, and they will answer them as they come in. Today is the ABCs of PEO. We'll be featuring our guest speakers, Ed Probst, who's the president of Vanguard Benefits, and Tommy DiMisa, who is the director of strategic alliances at Vanguard Benefits. Today, you're going to gain insights into how the PEO can streamline your HR processes. You're going to learn about the benefits of partnering with the PEO and if it's really right for you. You're going to explore fundamental elements necessary for a thriving PEO partnership, and you'll have all your questions answered to the best of your ability. This is going to be recorded. If you would like to share it afterwards, we will be sending out the recording sometime next week. So with that said, I would like to introduce you again to Tommy and Ed and hand it over to them. Welcome, guys.
Okay, thanks, Allison. And welcome, everyone. It's great to be here with NRH today, presenting on PEO. It's a very interesting topic, something that we're excited to deliver because we still see a lot of misnomers, a lot of misinformation about PEOs, and a lot of misunderstanding about PEOs. So we're excited to deliver the content. We'll just take 2 seconds, Tommy and I, to introduce ourselves, just to let you know who we are. I am a founding partner of Vanguard Benefits. My name is Ed Probst. As Allison mentioned, I have been in employee benefits for 25 years and have been helping employer groups, nonprofits, and for-profits alike transition to PEOs and unwind from PEOs at times. So I think the lens that I can look at this from will be very helpful to a lot of you that are considering it. Tommy, you want to just take a second and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks, Ed. So, the interesting part is while Ed has 25 years of experience in the benefits world, we met while I was in the payroll business with ADP. I spent several years of my career with different PEOs in the marketplace, TriNet, Co-Advantage, and certainly had a lot of time in the ADP world. ADP has its own PEO called ADP Total Source. And while Ed and I and our other partner, Vinny, had met throughout the years, there's a lot of complementary business that we were able to bring to each other. And it really set the stage. Vanguard was certainly a PEO-focused firm prior to my involvement. However, just became even more so. And it's a major opportunity for small and medium-sized businesses to take advantage of. I have the REBC, Registered Employee Benefits Consultant designation. And just, Ed is very credentialed himself in our world. So we're excited to educate people and continue to connect people with opportunities in the marketplace. So thanks, Ed.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. So the title of today's presentation is the ABCs of PEO. We are monitoring the chat. So we are going to take questions as they come up along the way, unless it's information that we're going to get to shortly, and then we'll just let you know that. But we encourage you to type your questions in the chat. And let us, and we'll address those as we go along. We'll try to take breaks to do that. So please do that. So what we're going to cover today as part of the ABCs of PEO, we're going to do kind of a PEO 101 and just give you a broad overview of what a PEO, the nuts and bolts of what you need to know about what a PEO is. We're going to help you understand why you might want to consider working with a PEO. And if you do, we want to help you discuss best practices, I should say, on how to evaluate the PEO market, because certainly there's a lot of options. We'll talk about co-employment and what that is, which is a key component to PEO. We'll talk about cost reduction that may come along with with PEOs. So we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about some of the recruiting benefits that might be impactful to your organizations by using a PEO. And we'll talk about HR support as well, and how PEOs can help become an outsourced HR function of your organization. And then we'll wrap up with any final questions you have. So to get us started, I'm going to turn it over to Tommy. He's going to talk about the ABCs of PEO and some of the basics that we want to get across.
Thank you, Ed. So what is a PEO? Professional Employer Organization. This is an industry that's been around for over 30 years. There are actually 900 different companies that provide this level of service. So it makes it complex to evaluate, which we'll get into later in this conversation. But there are many options out there for sure. So a professional employer organization, not yet a household name, although it certainly is becoming more so. Outsourced human resources, you'll see there, where you see a lot of the risk. So it says there, the PEO assumes certain employer risks, responsibilities, and rights as an employer. So you'll notice there, it's kind of broken down really into what I like to call a Venn diagram there. You see the employer's worksite responsibilities. So that would be the employer. So if you're a company and you have 25 employees, you're the worksite employer in this dynamic, and you maintain business control of operations, direction of employees, when employees show up, how they're supposed to, what their hours are, how they interact with your customers or other employees. And you also ultimately make the hiring and firing decisions, as well as the advancement of employees throughout that relationship. I'm going to skip over that middle piece and jump down to what the PEO's administrative responsibilities are, because they become the administrative employer of record in this dynamic. So you'll see the HR roles there: payroll, HR management and compliance, personnel management and training, benefits. So they will help the worksite employer, you all, get access to benefits, as well as the administration of the benefits will be maintained on the side of the PEO, and risk management. We're being very basic here, but workers' compensation and compliance. But it gets more very technical, and a lot of the liability, as I say, shifts over to the PEO. And then you'll see that middle section, the regulatory compliance there, hiring and termination processing. That's a shared opportunity or shared responsibility between the two, because sometimes when you'll see the hiring and firing decisions we mentioned up top, but when it comes to some terminations and things like that, because of this co-employment relationship, which we're going to talk about in the next couple of slides, there is that shared responsibility in some of these as that overlap goes.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Tom, I think the thing about a PEO that we get asked a lot is am I going to lose control of my business? So you get the best of both worlds. You're able to take advantage of the resources and the compliance help that a PEO would provide, but you're not turning your day-to-day operations over to them. There are a couple of things I will mention that are requirements. One question we get asked a lot is, can I carve out payroll? Can I do my own payroll and work with a PEO? The answer to that is no. That is one of the few things that is mandatory within a PEO, that you do use their payroll service, and that's a requirement of PEOs in general. But you may be allowed to carve out things and work on your own separately with benefits, workers' comp, and even your 401k.
That's a great point, because that is what creates the dynamic of the co-employment that we're going to talk about in a moment here. So it is a very fast-growing business. You'll see annually $42 billion in annual revenue. The growth of the industry has gone up substantially over the years, and expected to continue to grow, to increase expected growth rate of 11.1% annually through 2030. That's an interesting slide, and that's great for the PEO industry. But really, what does that mean? Why is that relevant to people on a call like this? Because the benefits mainly of a PEO, and I use the word benefit, I want to define that. The reasons why your company would benefit from using a PEO could be employee benefits, and that's certainly in a lot of cases part of the conversation, but it's also that shift in risk. So why this particular slide would be important to folks on the call is because this is going to continue to grow because of the legislation and regulation around small and medium-sized businesses, around human resources and other compliance issues. There's going to continue to be opportunities where small businesses can leverage a PEO, and that's why we do a lot on the education side with Vanguard Benefits to show people how important it is to look at these options.
Yeah, Tom, and recently I will add that we're seeing explosive growth within PEO, particularly in small businesses. One of the reasons is health insurance rates have steadily increased in the small business market and nonprofit market, small employer, and that is causing a lot more of employers, and also the choices have shrunk. So there's a lot more, there's limited options that you can choose from a health insurance perspective for a small business. So that's causing a lot more activity in the marketplace where small businesses and nonprofits are looking to work with PEOs.
So as Ed mentions, the payroll piece that you must, if you decide to engage with the PEO, the payroll piece is critically important. That's one of the parts of the co-employment nature. So you see the PEO relationship involves this contractual allocation and sharing of certain employee responsibilities between the PEO and the client as delineated in a contract called a client service agreement. So a lot of this is legalese when you get down to that client service agreement, but it shows where the responsibility moves and shifts. I've always thought of this in terms of if I can shift the liability and risk of being a business owner onto another entity and not have any downside, that seems like a very important thing to take a look at. So for the obligations of the PEO agrees that with respect to its clients, the PEO assumes specific employer rights, responsibilities, and risks through the establishment and maintenance of the relationship with the workers of the client. That's this co-employment, and that's what it looks like. It's sort of a triangle. You have the employee, the employer, and then the PEO. And then there's some below this, we're going to give you some bullet points about what that relationship looks like. So the PEO may assume certain employment responsibilities for specified purposes regarding the workers at the client locations. The PEO shares and or allocates employment responsibilities with a client in a manner consistent with the client maintaining it's responsible for its own product or services. It also, the PEO remits wages and withholding. So if you're a company that already engages with a payroll service bureau, or you're familiar with this model, that would be consistent with the PEO. PEO would issue W-2s at the end of the year for compensation under its employer identification number, and then reports and collects deposits, local taxes, state taxes, and with the federal authorities as well. So that's what co-employment looks like.
Yeah, so for tax obligations and for employee payroll taxes, your 941s that you're used to filing on a quarterly basis would be filed for your by the PEO on using their federal ID number. There are times where their state unemployment rate, which you'd be using their rate, might be lower than yours, and you could find savings there. But you'd be filing taxes for employment taxes under the PEO's tax identification number. And then the other question we get asked a lot about, when folks are considering a PEO is, what does the check look like, right? So one thing that you need to understand is that most PEOs will have their logo on the check. Some will let you have yours as well, and you might be able to co-brand the checks. But your employees do know that they're working with an organization, they're employed by your organization, but they're also co-employed with the PEO, and that's evident by what is on their paychecks. So something to keep in mind as you're considering.
Yeah. The other thing I think about that is there's I don't know if anybody's reading between the lines, but there's no real reason why you wouldn't want your employees to know. You become like what we consider an employer of choice. You look like a large employer. We have companies. I mean, I've put a handful of companies that have less than 10 employees, some less than 5 employees with the PEO when it's appropriate. Excuse me, and the employer becomes an employer of choice, offering Fortune 500 caliber benefits, which we'll get into, and really being able to attract and retain talent at a level they were unable to do so as a small business. You'll see some of the HR services, HR management services. We've gone through payroll and tax a little bit here, performance management services, recruiting, building of culture, and compensations consulting. Again, when you think in terms of a PEO that has many worksite employer groups, many clients, they get a lot of data, and they're able to leverage that data for their clients to educate them. We talked a bit about benefit services, but healthcare, ACA compliance, they're going to make sure, because it's both the PEO and the employer group's responsibility to maintain compliance. They're going to make sure you're compliant there. Have access to life, disability, dental, and vision insurance, and on top of the healthcare, which is always that core benefit always seems to drive a lot of conversations. And then also access to 401k, other retirement type plans, voluntary benefits, complementary benefits, and then again, risk services, compliance services on the bottom there. I've even been around with PEOs as you get into the more riskier type businesses, in a lot of quote unquote white collar businesses, it's okay. The PEO is going to handle the workers' compensation and the insurance and things like that. But when you get into the more riskier businesses, there's risk folks that come out on site that will get very involved with the company to, maintain and make sure that the company is not only in compliance, but has the right processes and procedures and best practices in place to avoid any issues, any injuries or otherwise.
Yeah, and a few comments I'll add, Tom. From an HR standpoint, when you're evaluating a PEO, they're all different. As Tommy's alluding to, you might have HR PEOs that we like to call them HR light, where they'll be more of a resource for your and provide technology and services and resources that would support your HR department. Others might be more engaged and can actually provide, as Tommy mentioned, on-site HR people to help support your HR department. It doesn't replace your HR. And in fact, a lot of our clients that work with PEOs actually still either have their own HR director or hire outsourced HR directors. So there's definitely that support arm that works hand in hand with a PEO. And from a benefits perspective, I'll add that, nowadays we're seeing a lot of those services and benefits that support work-life balance as being a very key component to any benefits offering, especially when you want to be competitive from a recruiting and retention standpoint. And a lot of smaller organizations don't have access to this and don't put those robust packages in. So by working with a PEO, you might get access to things like pet insurance or disability products that some don't have, or mental health services like EAP that other organizations don't have. So that can be very helpful to a small organization. And from a risk and compliance standpoint, if you're over 50 employees, as you probably already considered or considering options to comply with the Affordable Care Act. PEOs do that for you, as well as COBRA administration. That's automatic. So a smaller employer that needs to comply with COBRA, as you would know, it can be a real burden sometimes managing COBRA, billing employees, keeping track, providing notices. That's one thing that a PEO can take off your plate, and they will provide all of that. And the COBRA employees actually become their employees. So something to consider, something that really takes a lot of the administrative burden off the employer. Okay, so I'll take over for this part, and we'll talk about why you should use a PEO, and a little bit about, why our clients have come to us, why they've asked us for PEO services, and why they eventually work with a PEO. For smaller organizations especially, one of the value props is it enables you to focus on your business. We talked about a lot of things already. We talked about HR services. We talked about compliance. We talked about benefits administration. That's a lot to handle, especially for a small organization, particularly a nonprofit organization where the leadership team might be wearing a lot of hats already. And to have to engage and make sure that you're compliant with benefit laws, providing benefits compliantly, and handling HR, which changes every day, can be somewhat of a burden. So definitely something that is attractive to at least smaller organizations that don't have HR teams. You can gain economies of scale and control costs. That's a big one. A lot of our clients come to us because they want it. They want to find options to save money on their benefit costs. And as Tommy mentioned before, you can get Fortune 500 type benefits through a PEO in a lot of cases at a reduced cost. And one of the reasons that is because they may have anywhere, a smaller PEO may work with 40 or 50,000 worksite employees, where larger ones could work with as high as 500,000, and that is economy of scale that they're gaining by the mass that they have allows them to reduce benefit costs. So it does that, and it creates operational efficiencies as well that might reduce costs for you. Simplifies benefits business administration, and that's something I can have a client in my mind right now that we're working with that is considering a PEO. They have a lot of moving parts in their business. They have somewhat of a complicated payroll, but they have benefits, they have workers' comp, they have technology that is not integrated and it's not speaking to one another. And it causes a lot of work on the HR and CFO by processing payroll because they have a lot of employees to pay. So one of the things that's a benefit of a PEO is everything is integrated. The technology, the HRIS, the payroll services, the benefit, and the benefit administration system that's provided to the employees is all integrated and speaks to one another. So once you're onboarding an employee, that employee gets onboarded into that system, and now the system controls all of these things, including workers' comp, which would be on a pay-as-you-go basis, which can be a real value to organizations. So that single point of contact is something that our clients are really asked for and like. And reduce employment risk. We talked about that a little bit already, but shifting that risk over to a PEO does help you sleep better at night, right? So there may be some inflexibilities, and when I say that, things you might want to consider. The PEO is going to make sure that you comply with what you need to comply with. And a lot of times we find smaller organizations don't even know what they don't know. Like they don't know that they're not compliant, and their business processes might be a certain way that a PEO might need changes in that business process in order to make sure you are compliant. So it might cause a little bit of an inflexibility, but it also might help you sleep better at night. So I would say that is definitely one of the top reasons that employers come to us, especially in this day and age, is they want to reduce their liability and risk. So just some facts and figures we throw in here. We won't spend a lot of time on this, but NAPEO, which we'll talk about later on, is the National Association of PEOs. It's the trade organization and lobbying organization for the PEO industry. They came out with facts and figures that are relevant. Their numbers show that businesses and nonprofits that work with PEOs grow 7 to 9% faster. They achieve 27% more ROI for their PEO clients. As far as employee turnover goes, they're 10 to 14% lower in employee turnover. And that's something that you could equate real dollars to. The cost of employee turnover can be as high as 25% of the salary of that employee. So 10 to 14% is real numbers when you're talking about that, because of their support and being able to help you in that retention and recruiting aspect. That can relate to real dollars. And 50% of businesses and nonprofits are 50% less likely to go out of business when they're working with a PEO, and that's from NAPEO, the National Association of PEOs. Okay, so again, top reason why employers select a PEO. One is medical insurance, right? And that is, from our perspective, is one of the top reasons that employers come to us is for medical insurance and trying to reduce costs on their medical insurance. Other reasons are workers' comp. They might be experiencing high workers' comp rates, and they want to see if working with a PEO can reduce costs there. Integrated systems we talked about, and human resource support, whether that be hands-on or a partnership where they're providing resources for the existing HR department. So again, to drill down a little bit on the reasons why. As I said, medical insurance. Employers, being that we're an employee benefit agency, the top reason that people come to us is because they want to save money on their medical insurance. And depending on the type of organization and the demographics of the organization, medical insurance could be a huge savings. And we have seen, on average for the businesses and organizations that qualify, around 15 to 35% with savings on their medical insurance benefits. Again, that really depends on the type of organizations. We've seen as high as 50 to 75% savings. And I think of one right now that a client that Tommy's working with right now, that it's about that number. It's very, very substantial. So, it's one of the things we tell our clients is if you're looking to explore every option you can from a medical insurance standpoint, you should at least look at a PEO. It may not be right for you, but you should explore whether it is or not, because there is a chance you can have substantial savings within that. We do have a question in the chat, so I will get to that. Some of these questions we're gonna get to at the end. The accreditations we'll talk about when we get to the end of the presentation. Let's talk about what size nonprofits qualify for a PEO. That's a great question. So that it's a good segue into what we're talking about here, because it's it's very tied to the medical insurance offerings, right? So most PEOs want to work with minimum size of 3 employees to 5 employees. I think we have 1 or 2 PEOs that will work with 3. Most of them want 5 or more. Some of them will go as high as 10 employees on payroll or on benefits, I should say, that that are on benefits in order to qualify for the PEO. As far as on the high side,
and I just want to make one point too, if I could, to what you're saying there. Even in a scenario where, and I've had several clients with this, so our firm is Vanguard Benefits. We're a benefits agency, so that's accurate, right? However, benefits is only a portion. When I say benefits, let's just speak health insurance. It's only a portion of the conversation when we're talking about PEO, and I think we got to be mindful of that when you're assessing a PEO or just thinking of PEO in general. We have several clients that have engaged with the PEO, and the PEO is handling the benefits, the HR, the compliance, and is not directly handling their health insurance. There's several reasons why that is. We can get into it on a one-on-one conversation, but there's that opportunity. Sometimes I'll give you an example. If a company is too small, and I have 2 groups like this that went with the PEO, but were too small to even utilize the what they call the master plan, which is the health insurance plan with that PEO. It was 2 different PEOs in the scenarios I'm talking about. And they still wanted to leverage all of the other pieces, all of the other slices of the PEO pie, if you will. And so I just say, even if somebody is too small, so if an organization, a company, a business is too small to hit the numbers for the benefits, many of these PEOs will still let you utilize them for those other services. So I think it's important to point that out. Thanks, Ed.
Yeah, great point, Tommy. And also with the medical insurance plans, there's different carriers, right? So each PEO might work with a different carrier. Some may work with very popular as Aetna. Some may work with Blue Cross Blue Shield or Cigna, and some could work with Empire or Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield. So that is something to consider when you're looking at the PEO. And from a risk standpoint, you're going to be rated based on your own demographics now. So that's something that's important to consider. When you are rated by a PEO, you are rated based on your own risk, and that's different if you're an employer in New York, let's say, and outside New York, depending on the state you're in, it could be a modified version of this. But you are in a small group market, you're not really getting any credits for claims experience or negative effects for claims experience. With a PEO, there's a couple of things that tie into that. One, you are now rated based on your own demographics of your group, so age and gender population of your group. You will also be rated at some point based on the claims experience of your group, but because that is shared with all the other members of the PEO, that risk is lower than it would be if that was just your group and you were experiencing high claimants. But you should know that you are rated based on your own demographics. And when you are rated as a new client to a PEO, there's underwriting involved. So a couple of things that they'll do, and this is as technology is evolving, this is becoming more and more evolved, but they can do script searches where when they rate your group, they'll do what they call a GRX score, and they'll be able to look at what prescription usage is going on in your group, and even something that's similar to that called the gradient search, which actually is like the Medical Information Bureau, which they can tie in to see if there's any high risk going on in your group. This is not a negative. This is actually a positive. You want to be rated correctly when you're working with a PEO, because generally speaking, your your increases that you will receive on your medical insurance plan over the years should be more like trend type increases, which should average anywhere between 6 and 10%. 10% being on the high end, but we have seen even lower than that. So when you're rated correctly and you're working with the right PEO for your organization, you should see a stable flow of medical insurance increases over the years that would set you up to be more stable long term and more easier to budget your expenses. Talk about workers' comp, how they handle workers' comp. Well, a couple of the benefits. Some PEOs treat workers' comp as more of a pass-through, and you'll see that your workers' comp will probably be very similar priced with the PEO as you have right now. That is one area where they would have flexibility in a lot of cases to allow you to use your own workers' comp if for some reason you're better off using your own workers' comp. And then there's other PEOs, some of them self-fund all or a portion of their workers' comp, and they can actually work with even blue collar type risks sometimes to find savings for in a workers' comp standpoint. So it definitely is something that can be considered as an or identified as an area where you possibly could save dollars within a PEO. And just going back to what we talked about before, I think we went off in another direction talking about, just to elaborate on the size. We talked about the small end, but for organizations on the top end, there is really no limit to the number of employees. Typically, the high end number for a PEO is somewhere in that 250 to 500 range, but I do know employers that have had more than that and worked with a PEO. Generally speaking, larger organizations have more developed and more robust HR teams, and they might not see the value in this. And if if their benefit costs are stable already, they might, that might be another reason. But definitely in that, 5 to 250, that's a very, very attractive market for PEOs. The other thing with workers' comp you'll see is, as I mentioned before, is pay as you go. With workers' comp. So you're going to pay your workers' comp premiums as you're paying your payroll taxes by payroll, and you'll have no audits at the end of the year, which is something that can be burdensome as well and costly if you haven't budgeted correctly for your workers' comp premiums.
Yeah, and one other point on that, and probably people read between the lines and have maybe even seen that as an opportunity from your payroll provider if you are outsourcing payroll. But the cash flow issue is something really to be considerate of, because when you pay that upfront premium, maybe it's 50%, and then at the year, as Ed mentions, you have the audit. It's a lot easier for organizations, whether they be nonprofit organizations or for-profit businesses, to pay as you go, so to speak, which is what is some of the companies either pay by pay or pay as you go is some of the terms, but it's based on the actual hours worked, and the workers' comp is in lockstep with that. So it's something to consider from a cash flow perspective, whether you look at a PEO or not. These are things you should inquire about. We can certainly help you with connections to those type of opportunities as well. Thanks, Ed.
So moving on, let's talk about integrated systems. So we talked about this a little bit before, but just to drill down, the integrated management of HR and benefits could be very beneficial to an organization. Combining your HRIS, payroll, benefits administration, time and attendance, your employee onboarding, learning management modules, 401k, voluntary benefits administration, and regulatory filings. Having that all speaking to one another in one system is definitely an advantage and can allow you to be more streamlined and save time, which saves money. One thing, I don't recall if I mentioned it before, but talking about 401k, when working with a PEO, you're going to have the option to either use their 401k, and depending on the size of the organization and the provider you work with, you may find that the fund choices and selections have lower fees or more robust options, or maybe your 401k has that all, but you'll be able to have that ability to either use their 401k and have everything integrated, or use your own, taking away that step of pulling money out of payroll and then paying your 401k provider, having that all integrated by using theirs, again, is another way you can save money. PEOs, from a 401k perspective, they do allow, most of them anyway, to have financial advisors tied to the investment selections that are in the PEO. So if you have a financial advisor you work with and you really like them, there's a chances that they can still continue to have that relationship with you. If you don't have a financial advisor and you're working with a PEO, it's probably a good time for you to think about having one, to be involved and help your employees with education and things like that. Then finally, compliance and HR. We talked about this again already. The ability to have to rest easy by having somebody that's partnered with you on a co-employment basis, that has a vested interest in making sure that you're engaging, that you're providing services to your employees, and you're paying them and supporting them correctly in compliance with the laws and HR. It helps, especially those smaller organizations that may not have these kind of services themselves. So it allows you to focus on what you do best, create more revenue for your organization, and work on your core business, so that you are not completely having to weigh down or burdened with administrative and compliance tasks. We'll turn it back over to Tommy. We'll talk about now what you should be considering when evaluating the PEOs that are available.
Yes, thank you, Ed. So this will be as much of a commercial as you'll ever see in this conversation today, because just to kind of tell you how we operate with our clients, it's going to be very, very small commercial. But really, here's what I'm going to tell you. Our former tagline was educating employers one employee at a time. We work on employee benefits and we work on education. And that's what we're doing here today with everybody, is educating folks. So what we tend to do with our clients, or prospective clients for that matter, is educate them on what is available in the marketplace. And when we prepared these slides, I mentioned maybe 27 minutes ago that there's about 900 PEOs in the marketplace, and that would be a very busy slide. So we shared some of the bigger names with you. There's a lot that goes into considering which PEOs to work with, and that's the commercial piece. That's what we do for our clients. We're going to go into some things to consider in a second here, but that's when you're looking at the PEO marketplace as a business owner, as a leader of an organization, as director of people, director of HR. One of the things you have to consider is, what do I have to do here, and how do I analyze which of these PEOs is the right fit? And Ed talks about some PEOs are lighter on the HR side. We talk in terms of people and technology, and those are two big pieces of what the PEO is going to bring you. And some PEOs will have that very high touch model, which some companies really want. And they say, I need an HR person to come out on a quarterly basis, or sometimes more frequently than that. There's PEOs that can provide that. And then there's PEOs that are very technology driven. So the alternative is this: when you go to the market, you have to provide a lot of data to these PEOs, census information about your company, information about your workers' comp, other policies that they're looking for. And then they're going to make a proposal. And then you have to then analyze from that proposal, what do I do? Which is the right one? Who's being the most honest about serving my needs and things like that. That's where we come in. That's what we do for our clients. It's that analysis of, we've done a due diligence with you, and then we go to the marketplace with you, finding what's best based on the needs that you asked about. So we can go to the next slide, Ed, please. So you see, we can shop and compare multiple PEOs. We'll bring back different. Here's where these PEOs line up from a technology perspective. Here's where they line up from a workers' comp cost perspective. Here's the benefits. Here's the carrier that they're using on the health insurance. Here's the ancillary or voluntary lines that they offer. And that's the analysis that we help our clients. Not to be a slight, or not to slight the professionals, the sales professionals at each of these organizations. However, I have been in that role. And when you only have one option, it's difficult to be the best consultant, where we have all the options in the marketplace and we can be the best advocate for you and your organization. Ed, let's just go to the next slide.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, though, as Tommy mentioned, this can be confusing. And one thing some of you may have experience with PEOs already. Some of you may have never even heard of a PEO before today. And some of you may have even gotten proposals for PEOs in the past. And, one thing that we've seen over the years is that, employers have become confused at times about whether they're right for a PEO or not. And part of the reason was they were probably approached by a PEO. Good chance that PEO was their payroll carrier, and they weren't right for that PEO, but they went about the process and provided the information, which is somewhat lengthy when you're first getting the proposals. A lot of information that they need to know to make sure that they quote you accurately. And then they go down the road, and at the end of the day, they found out that they weren't right for the PEO, and they went through the whole process when they really didn't need to. That can be frustrating. And what we found is by providing this data to a consultant like we are in a PEO advisory service, what we can do is then take the data one time and shop it to the whole PEO market, and also go to the ones we think might be right for you already. So it's important that you work with somebody that has a working knowledge of the PEO industry and can go to the right PEOs first, so that we can be very efficient with time and make sure that we're getting the financial proposals from the PEOs that make sense.
Thanks, Ed. So what do PEOs cost? How do they charge me? So Ed and Tommy, you're telling me I might save money on my benefits and I'm moving some of the risk over. How that shake out? What's that difference in cost going to be? So you'll see on the left, some PEOs, this is more of a historical way of doing things, but some PEOs still do this, and you see it more in PEOs, in my experience, PEOs that work in the blue collar space, but they include their administrative costs as a percentage of payroll. And lower, as we say there, lower waged employees, that that scenario or that method of pricing may be a good fit. However, when some of those PEOs charge a percentage of payroll, and you might be an employer who has high wage earners, then you're paying significantly more cost to the PEO, and you're not really getting any more work from them, but you're just paying them a higher fee. Most PEOs, and certainly the ones that we deal with on a regular basis, have a PEPM, which is a term we use a lot in our industry, is per employee per month. It's a flat monthly fee. It's something that's transparent. It's something that you as an employer and your financial office, your CFO, your controller folks are going to love that, because it's something I can manage and I can predict and project. Certainly good for, as we say, there are smaller organizations, but I tell you, in most of the cases we see this, that's the way many of the PEOs are going. Obviously, as I say, they're more transparent. One of the questions that comes up in the chat is things to look for, red flags and things like that. The next couple of slides are going to share that with us. So similar to the FDIC, as we know in banking, ESAC, or the Employer Services Assurance Corporation, is a governing body in it gives the accreditation in the PEO space. And you'll see 5% of PEOs are ESAC accredited. It's a certification in bonding, and as you see there, the gold standard for financial stability. So now you take those 900 PEOs, and 5% of those have this accreditation. Now this starts to become more of a hierarchy or a pyramid of who do you want to work with. And that's a lot of the analysis that we will go through with our clients. And you'll see there's 15 million in surety bonds backing the PEO's performance, payment of wages, payroll taxes, employee benefits, and insurance premiums. Over the years, I'm an old payroll guy. I came from ADP, and over the years, every so often you would see something where the PEO, a payroll company would abscond with money. They were a small payroll company, not one of the big ones, that abscond with money, and business owners were left in the lurch. These are the kind of things. These are the important accreditations and standards that you want to make sure will protect you as a business owner. And you'll see their PEO participation is voluntary. Why would it be voluntary? Well, because it costs money, and it also, they have to apply and they have to hit certain standards to fit into this mold, as with the additional piece that I'm going to show you right now, the CPEO. If we just get to that next slide, certified professional employer organizations. And again, 6% of the PEOs have it. This comes with IRS certification around the tax compliance. The company has to have a long background in the business. these standards have to be up to par to get this certification. So in that question that said, what are the things I should be looking for when I'm signing a contract with the PEO? This is a question that was in the chat. It would be these sort of standards that you would want to be mindful of. Is the PEO ESAC accredited? Is the PEO certified PEO? And then the third here is the PEO a member of NAPO or NAPO, the National Association of Professional Employer Organizations, which is really the industry standard. It's the trade association. And we know past presidents of this organization, and they go down to Washington to lobby on behalf of the industry to protect the industry, but also to protect the employer groups, the companies that are their clients. So they are the industry association, the trade association, and they're there advocating on behalf of the industry because, again, as Ed and I showed you on earlier slides, this industry continues to grow, and it continues to grow because small and medium-sized businesses need solutions like this.
And Tommy, I'll just add that before we go into which organizations are a good fit, going back to that, what the red flags you should look at in a contract. Most PEOs give you a 30-day out clause. So you will need to, if you want to terminate your service agreement with them, you have to give them 30-day notice. I will tell you, most of them are pretty strict with that. So you definitely do need to give them 30 days, but you want to read your contract and make sure that it's not a lengthier time and that there's not any termination fees that go along with the PEO. The other thing that'll come up, and I just had this recently that we looked at, some PEOs could have higher COBRA administrative costs, especially if you leave. When you leave a PEO, if you do move away from a PEO, those employees that are on COBRA stay with the PEO, and they will charge fees for those COBRA employees. So if you're an organization that has a lot of turnover and that you do have employees on COBRA, you should consider that. It's something that when you exit, you will be charged, and if they're charging you a lot of money for that, it could be costly. And then lastly, I'll just mention flexibility in payroll. If you're an organization that needs flexibility in the timing of when you run your payroll, let's say, that could be something that could be inflexible. So you should look into that. And there was another question. I think that ties right into what are the downsides of working with a PEO, right? And there's not a lot, right? I think we talked about a lot of great stuff here, and a lot of services and benefit savings that could really help an organization. If I had to say one downside to it, it's the inflexibility. There are processes and procedures from an employment standpoint that you will need to comply with. Some of that could be percentage of contribution on your benefit costs, but others as well. And one of those might be the timing of processing payroll. So if you are a small organization and your payroll processing or the way you are providing benefits to your employees is slightly unorthodox, that's something you really want to ask a lot of questions about and make sure that you have a professional that's doing this with you to ensure that your processes match what the PEO's processes are. That's something we do, when we help our clients do an analysis to whittle down the PEOs that are right for them from a financial perspective. The last piece to that is to make sure that they meet directly with the PEOs and understand exactly what the processes are so that they know that they align and there won't be any surprises once they're a client. We'll talk a little bit about which organizations are good for a PEO. Looks like it's about 11 minutes. We're right on time. So PEOs or organizations that are good for a PEO. One, I will say white collar organizations that have a lot of participation in benefits are ideal clients for PEOs. That is not to say that if you are gray or blue collar, there's not a home for you within a PEO. There certainly is. And if you don't have high benefit participation, there still might be a home for you somewhere. But the ideal type of organization that works with a PEO has those characteristics. And we find that the benefits or the financial benefits from working with them are better, because typically, if you're able to find, if you're an organization that has a number of employees and a high amount of them are participating in your benefits, the benefits that costs that are reduced are going to help you offset any administrative costs that the PEOs provide. So in a lot of the cases, we're moving clients to PEOs that net are gaining all these services. And as Tommy mentioned to you before, there are administrative costs that you need to pay the PEO in order to get all these services. But at the end of the day, the savings that we're creating on benefits in other areas within a PEO are offsetting all those costs. So net, they're in a positive standpoint. They're getting better benefits and more services, and their costs are lower. And that's what we're trying to achieve. So in that case, that's the ideal situation. So the ideal clients also somewhere between 5 and 500 employees, as I mentioned before. They have a growth mindset. They have a variety of industries and geographics. So, nonprofits certainly are organizations that benefit well from PEOs. Many times we've had a lot of success working with nonprofits and providing these services at lower costs for them. But it's a variety of different industries, different varying compensation levels. I would say geographic location is something that you can benefit from. If you are an organization that has employees in many states, or even just a few states, and you're managing different tax jurisdictions, that can be a great benefit by working with a PEO that already has payroll, employees, and benefit offerings that are aligned with those states. So it makes it easier to just plug and play and work with a PEO to use their benefits for those states.
So Ed, certainly I back up what you say there about the multi jurisdictions. It's critically important, especially with people working remotely now, as you and I always talk about, and companies expanding nationally. The one piece I wanted to say, which I don't, again, we've been together talking about this so many years, I don't know who said it first, but a lot of times what we're coming in to do, folks, is to come in and find a way where the savings, whether it be from the workers' comp and or the employee benefits and other services like state unemployment insurance and things like that, to find a way where the company, our client, walks away even. Okay, so that benefits offset the investment that there would be on the administrative services. More to come on all that when we do sit down on a one-on-one if you want to sit with us on that. But I think that's something to consider. It doesn't necessarily mean if I move my company to a PEO that it's going to cost us more. There's often occasions where it ends up companies net save money. And this is Ed's going to give you an example now.
Yeah, so I'll give you a few examples. So in this case, we had a 75 employee client that was shopping the open market for benefits. So they were going to find direct market benefits from different carriers. They came to us in order to quote PEO. So we were able to help them move their payroll, their HR, all their benefit solutions to the PEO. And they were initially able to save 32% on their benefit costs, and they were also able to lower their workers' compensation costs by 18%. I'll give you two other specific examples that I think encompass the range of employee sizes, employer sizes. Recently, we had a smaller nonprofit with about 10 employees and had 8 on benefits in New York City, white collar organization, all office exposure. And we were able to save them 35% on their benefit costs by moving them. They were able to consolidate. They were with ADP for payroll. They were able to consolidate it. They were facing an issue because in the New York market, there has been a carrier scale down of the carriers that are available and increase in costs. And the carrier that they were working with was no longer available. So we were able to place them with now a large national carrier that gave their employees a much greater exposure to physicians and providers that they can use. And we reduced their costs and gave the employees better benefits. So overall, net, they were able to have an integrated service, better benefits, better costs. And that was very, very beneficial to a smaller organization. The other example I'll give you is an organization that's been a client of ours for over 10 years. They're a nonprofit also in New York City. They have about 175 employees. And the thing I'll point out for their organization is for 10 years straight, they've stayed with the same PEO, with the same benefit provider. They have not had to increase deductibles or cost share for the employee over these years, and very minimal on employee contributions. And they've been able to average around 4 to 5% in increased benefit costs over those years. And if we compared, which we've done, and that's one of the things that we do for our clients is year over year, or maybe not every year you'd want to do this, but I would say every 2 to 3 years while you're with a PEO, it's still important to compare to what's available in the direct market to make sure that what you have is still competitive. With this particular organization, we've been able to do that twice over the last 5 years. And after we were finished with our analysis, it was still determined that where they were was the right place from a cost perspective and a benefit perspective for their employees. So a lot of, a broad range of examples there, but certainly I think that can encompass why employers, are so attracted to PEOs.
Yeah. And Ed, I'll just throw in one or two myself quickly as we finish up here. Similar situation, small group, 4 employees, first implementing employee benefits. So they're New York-based group, Long Island-based group. And what it would have taken for them to get employee benefits would have been a very substantial investment, as those of us who know in the small group market here in New York know that the rates on the PEO's benefits, because of the demographics of this group, a very young group, were 35 to 40% of what the cost would have been premium wise in the open market. 35 to 40%, things not a 35 to 40% less, but a 35 to 40% cost compared to what was available in the open market. So that's what we call oftentimes it's kind of the no-brainer opportunity. So you save all that money, you put in championship benefits for your employees, and you get all these services from the PEO at, relatively speaking, no cost, because you see such a substantial savings. And every year when we renew with our clients, when we're looking at a renewal, we're discussing PEO. Even if they're not with the PEO, we're always talking about that. It's something you should definitely take a look at and definitely evaluate. And I think Ed was going to tell you, there's our company information.
Yeah, so if you have any questions after this presentation today, even if you just want to bounce a few ideas off us, ask us questions. There's no obligation to work with our organization. As members of the NRH, we're happy to provide you with anything. If you want to send us, if you've been looking at a PEO and you want to send it to us to make sure that you've done your due diligence, we're happy to do that for you. If you are in a situation where you want to consider it for your organization, our process is we would do the intake call with you and collect the information one time that we would need, and then we would go out to the markets and provide you with an analysis that would compare costs from the varying PEOs that would work for you. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. You can either contact us directly or through NRH, and we're happy to help you with anything you need.
Thank you, Ed. Thanks everybody.
So thanks to everybody that joined us today. I don't see any questions, but if anybody has any final questions, we're happy to take them. If not, we'll give you back a couple of minutes. Well, 1 minute. We're right on time. This was great timing. But so if we'll give you back a minute on your day, and again, we appreciate you attending today.
Thank you once again. Thank you both. There was a lot of information to be covered. If anybody has any questions after today, you're welcome to reach out to me or to Ed or Tommy, and we'll be happy to help you out. I want to thank you both for all that information and for your time today, and for everyone who has joined. So have a great day and have a great weekend. Thank you.